once was an old tree that lived high above the seas. One day it was struck by lightning, and it was quite frightening. The tree fell down, making a crashing sound. It was so far away, it thought to never be found. However, on the next calm day, a boy came walking by, and to his surprise, the tree said,
Hi.
Hi, are you okay? Did you get knocked over by the storm yesterday?
I am a tree who once lived high above the sea. Now, the stump is what is left of me. And yes, I was knocked over yesterday. But I'm okay. I shall tell you my story. For the lesson you will learn is certainly not boring.
and the boy stared excitedly as the tree began to share delightedly.
I, the tree, grew to be 100 foot 3. If you look at my rings, you will learn many things. You will see that I am 14 years old.
Yeah, and each pair of light and dark rings adds up to 1 year, which is what I've been told.
Yes, this is true. Also, because of my wide and evenly spaced rings, you can see that I am a healthy tree. But I did not do this alone, for I had great support and a wonderful home. The taller trees gave me space over the top of my branches so that I may receive plenty of water and bright sunlight. Over the years, I've had many experiences. I've been a home to many birds and bugs, snails and slugs. However, there were times that were dire, like when there was a forest fire, but we adapted and weathered hard times, which is evident by my narrowly spaced lines. No matter what, we always knew we could get back up. But there were times we had to let go also. A branch was pruned and reused to support other things. It was hard, but with great strife, I accepted that these new branches could give new life.
Wow, and because you are a tree, you can't move anywhere, yet your journey took you from here to there.
Thank you for listening. I hope you found my story interesting. I hope my every penny was well earned. Now, tell me, lad, what have you learned?
So our story that we just heard ended on a wonderful question. That question is, so what did we learn from the tree, and how might we use it to tell our story? Well, let's take a moment to reflect and think about that. We learned that a pair of a light and a dark ring makes for 1 year of growth of a tree. We also learned that trees get their support from water and sunlight so that it can grow tall and strong. And as well, like us, trees can experience hardships like maybe a flooding or a forest fire that may slow down its growth, but it can endure these hardships and may slow down a bit, but over time it will begin to regrow and grow back again. So as you can see from a tree, they are wonderful storytellers and can document their stories very well. So as we tell our story, let's look to the trees and let's remember to celebrate the special and unique things about ourselves. So now I'm going to turn it over to my friend Mallory, who's going to lead us on a great art making activity for this project.
Thank you, Ryan. So before we begin our project, before we launch right in, I wanted to do a quick note on materials. So Ryan told us that tree rings tell the story of a tree's life. And we're going to be telling our own life stories through tree rings by making a tree ring mandala. And we'll get more into what the history behind mandalas and behind infusing our own stories as we go into making the project. But to do so, you'll need to gather materials that you feel a connection to. So at Family Art Project, as you've learned from this Depth and Distance series, we really value using upcycled materials. That means materials where giving new life to, breathing new life to. So in my tree ring mandala here, I sourced the materials from my own little natural collection. I'm always picking up different stones and acorns and seed pods and beautiful leaves that I see, and that's been really helpful for me as I've been home, because I have a connection to nature right in my own little treasure box of nature materials. But whatever you hold in high esteem, a treasure for you, you can use to create your tree ring mandala. So that might be old books and atlases, and we even have these old calendars here that I cut into little papers to show you that you can make tree rings really out of anything. You could cut little fabric scraps out of old clothes, maybe just out of pretty patterned paper. Even with the cutoffs, I realized that there are some beautiful little ring-like forms, and you could totally, while this is more two-dimensional-ish, you could have a more sculptural piece by gluing some of these rings together. So as I get into this project, I urge you all to make this project your own and really let the materials that you have access to be what informs and creates your story.
So let's get started. You'll see that right off the bat, I'm putting hands to materials and using a hot glue gun to attach natural materials in a circle shape. That is because we are creating mandalas today. Mandalas are spiritual symbols in both the Buddhist and Hindu religions. Mandalas are works of art in which those creating the mandala can focus their mind. A mandala is infused with sacred symbols that can take you to sacred places. As we construct our own mandalas, I want us to remember that this art form is sacred to many people and has its roots in Buddhist and Hindu religions. And I urge you to learn more about mandalas and see how these creations are used as religious tools. And you can do so by the link down below from our friends over at Rubin Museum, who have great resources on mandalas. An important note is that mandalas are circles because circles are thought to be a magical form without beginning and end. And that is precisely why we are creating the mandala to craft our tree rings together to tell a story. We learn from trees and other parts of nature that life happens in cycles. So, of course, as we begin layering the tree rings, we're going to use the creation of these tree ring mandalas to bring focus to our own story and to create our own sacred space and to use the tree rings to tell the stories of the lives we've lived. As Ryan found out from the tree in the story, tree rings tell you how old a tree is. 2 rings mark 1 year of growth. So you'll see by the end of this video, I've only added 6 rings to my mandala, and that means I've only documented 3 years of my life. As we explore how tree rings can help us tell our own life story, I'd like to share with you why I've documented just the first 3 years of my life in this mandala, but I'll share prompts along the way based on the science of dendrology, which is the study of tree rings, dendrology, the study of tree rings, and you can follow along using the worksheet below, linked below. So you might want to, if you're a little bit younger than I am, it might be easier for you to create 8 rings if you're 4 years old, or 12 rings if you're 6. And those tree rings are either light or dark. The light and dark rings will always alternate. That is because the wood formed in the spring grows fast. These rings are lighter in a tree cookie, and the wood formed in summer grows slower. These rings are darker. When in your life can you see that you've grown? As you go through each year, think about your proudest moments of doing hard things, when you felt supported by your family and your friends, or times in your life when you took on more responsibility. On your tree ring mandala, you'll mark these times of growth by distance from the rings. So if there was a little bit of growth in one year, those tree rings might be very close. If there was a lot of growth in 1 year, those tree rings will be further away. Again, you can do this in whatever medium that is accessible to you. Markers work great, scraps of paper, or natural materials like I'm using. If you're able to go out in nature right now, you can even arrange those natural materials without gluing them down, which is exactly the traditional way of creating the mandala, in honoring that fleeting or temporality of the moment. So, as you see me working on my mandala, you'll notice I am using cattail, samara seeds, corrugated cardboard, and dried hydrangeas and acorns to create the lighter rings. I'm thinking of all that softness. I'm thinking of how early in my life I was able to grow fast from the support of my sister and mom. So this particular mandala honors my mom in particular. At the very center of my tree ring is a wasp nest I found on the ground. And I did this because I am the daughter of a very strong woman who can create structure like the hive, but who has learned to sting to protect her and her hive. To create a lighter ring within that, I added a dried mushroom though, and that is because mushrooms reproduce just from what is within themselves. That is, they create new life through their own being. And I learned to be creative and resilient from my dear mother, so she is the center of my tree ring. To make darker rings, I am using a whole bunch of seed pods like pine cones and sweet gum, and I'm using dried magnolia leaves and dark leaves and purple leaves. And a little note on using natural materials, I always collect natural materials that have fallen to the ground. When you collect natural materials, you can get in the practice of asking nature if it is okay for you to collect, and you should listen to the answer. So, for example, you might see how some acorns, but then you might see how a little squirrel is frantically picking up these acorns, and maybe you take that as a no from nature for now. But maybe just in that moment, a big gust of wind blows, and you see a bunch of little maple samara seeds, those little helicopter-shaped seeds, fall to the ground. And maybe you take that as a yes from nature to collect the samara seeds instead. I'm going to leave a link to Robin Wall Kimmerer's Honorable Harvest to help you. It's a great resource, and that'll help you as you forage your own materials. So if you remember the story that Ryan and friends shared, tree rings actually shared a lot more than just their age. When something disturbs a tree, you can see it in the rings. An ecological disturbance is an event that causes change in the environment, which can cause a change in the ecosystem. So some examples of disturbances that might affect a tree include a forest fire, flooding, storms, insect outbreaks, bug outbreaks, earthquakes, volcanic eruptions, or fallen trees leaning on one another. Some disturbances caused by humans include cutting down trees, carving a name in a tree, and climate change. So, as you construct your mandala, you're going to think about this. When in your life have you felt changed? You'll mark these disturbances, or changes, with knots and scars and other little markings of your choice to document your own interpretations of disturbances that happen to you in your community or your environment. So when did a hard time you face feel like a hot fire roaring? Have you ever felt something at home, in school, or in your community that was hard to deal with, like a storm of rain? Did you feel sad or angry feelings coming in, flooding in? What bugs you, like an insect? Have you ever felt overwhelmed with how much you needed to do or that was expected of you? Did you ever have something from your life pruned out, like branches being cut from a tree? When have you lost or had to give up something or someone special? Or when in your life did you support others? Has it ever felt like a friend or something you care for needed your support? You are going to mark these in your tree rings. To mark these knots and cracks in my tree, I used coffee grounds and damaged leaves. In the knots, I marked the strength of my single mother and how sometimes that was hard, but ultimately so deeply nourishing to have a mother who was a model for humility, perseverance, creative adaptive thinking in hard times. And there you have it, a tree ring mandala. You'll notice by the end your mandala is not a perfect circle. Even better, no tree rings are. So please, please, please share your work with us with the hashtag #DepthInDistance. Have a very happy Arbor Day weekend, tree friends. May your tree rings be seen and your stories be heard.